This is the Real Austin Podcast.
Casey Burack in the house. Thanks for being here.
Thanks, Ian. Thanks for having me.
So you are involved in something that for me, when I moved here, I was like, Austin is lacking.
Yes.
Big time.
Yeah.
Public transportation.
Yes.
And you're involved in a project that was voted on a few years ago, Project Connect. That's the umbrella. And you have, you're affiliated in a different way with that. And I didn't truly understand. I was actually talking to Candace, who works with you, prior to our meeting, or prior to our conversation, and she kind of explained the way it works.
Yeah.
So I would love to hear what your involvement is.
It's slightly complex, but on purpose. And I think for the best for our town and for this project.
Well, with so many new people moving here over the last few years, it's pretty confusing. So there's big changes coming. And that's one of the biggest things I hear all the time is lack of public transportation. It's an issue here. So I'd love to hear what your involvement is specifically with the project you're working on. And then I really just want to get an idea of what we can expect as people living in Austin over the coming years.
Great. Yeah, no, I'm really excited that you invited me on and that you're interested in what's happening, because it's a massive investment that all of us who live in Austin are making every day, whether you rent or own a house. It's, you're helping to fund this huge investment in our city for transportation, but really to kind of reshape the center of our city in a lot of ways. So maybe I'll go back in history and then I can kind of explain who Austin Transit Partnership is too. But so yes, in November 2020 was a very big election. People kind of recall who was on the ballot at that time. In Austin, Texas, we had started working at the time I was at Downtown Austin Alliance, which is the public improvement district of the property owners who are in downtown. And we were really advocating for improved transportation and specifically high capacity transit. So we have a great bus network in Austin, but we don't have dedicated lanes for a rail transportation system, with the exception of the Red Line, which is a commuter rail line. It serves kind of Northwest Austin, right? So, but a lot of the center of the city is not served by any high capacity rail transit. So there was a lot of desire for this. We'd had 2 failed referenda in the past, and kind of by the skin of our teeth, those of us who were advocating for this, that had failed. And so the run up to this massive election was a lot of work went into planning a project called Project Connect, which includes some bus improvements and different types of kind of mobility improvements, but primarily the bulk of it is a light rail system for Austin, first ever light rail system. So the Red Line is a commuter rail. Light rail just means doesn't quite have the capacity to carry as many passengers, but it's a game changer for us. And so I think 75% of registered voters in Austin came out to vote in that election. That is a record for this town. And almost 68% of them voted in favor of this project. And if you talk to anyone who's moved to Austin since, they've probably come from a place that has more transit options and maybe even light rail, and they're excited about the project, even if they don't know about it, right? So part of the election, the community said, we want this, but we want a dedicated organization and a board that's going to oversee the property tax increase that's going to fund all of these projects, including the light rail. We want them to make sure that this project happens, because the city has a lot of projects, right? And they're maybe not as focused as they would have been.
Slow.
Yeah, maybe slow, a little bit mired in politics, a little more than an organization like ours, which has a small board. It's a 5 voting member board. 3 of those voting members are not elected officials. So it's not as political, right, as other boards. So that was part of it, was create a separate entity and build out our transit system with light rail.
So when we voted back at that time, I don't remember exactly what the ballot looked like. I remember voting on approving.
Thank you.
Yeah, I voted yes. Was there a separate line item that said that a committee would be created?
So it said the funding, it started with how much the property tax would increase by, what it would go to build, and that the funding would be dedicated to an independent board, is what it said.
Okay.
And so out of that, to create that independent board, a local government corporation was created, which is also under Texas law, is able to take funding and bond finance that funding, which is part of our financial package and how we're going to pay for the capital cost, which is the construction cost of the light rail.
Yeah.
So it was all a funding mechanism, which was really critical to our city. And also this independence kind of concept, an independent organization was important politically to get a lot of different organizations to support or maybe not to go against the project. Because, there was a lot of politics happening at the time because of the election, but also the run-up with the pandemic and things that were just happening in the world, extra political. So it was really critical for Austin to have a separate entity to implement the project. And that is Austin Transit Partnership. So immediately after the vote, the entity was created. The board convened their first meeting in January of 2021. So my first day was the day before that first board meeting. I was the general counsel to help do that, to help oversee the board meeting, but also to help stand up the organization. And now we're about 55 strong.
So is that something that you seeked out once you're part of Downtown Alliance, and you saw that this was voted yes? Did you kind of know if this was approved, this is what I was going to go and try to be a part of this? Or was it kind of, once it got approved, you realize, this is a good opportunity for me?
So our organization, kind of like the chamber, different organizations, were so very involved in the election process and just working really closely with the city. It's a city ballot election, working closely with Cat Metro, which is the existing transit agency, just to help them get the votes, right, to get it to pass. So it's already kind of in the machinery a little bit because, it was such a critical project and still is for downtown. And so just in conversations, it was kind of like, okay, if this thing does pass, which it looked like it was going to based on polling, I knew they would need a lawyer. So I was the general counsel for the Downtown Alliance, and I applied and, luckily was able to, kind of land a dream job for me. My background was in real estate law. I did some project work as outside counsel for TxDOT, so I was kind of familiar with some of their projects and how to design and construct those, and then getting involved in downtown, so really caring about our community. So it was just perfect for me personally. Yeah.
So you made the distinction between the commuter rail and the light rail.
Yes.
I'm from Atlanta. I don't know if you've ever been, but MARTA.
From the airport.
Okay. So, yeah, a lot of people have been through the airport there. MARTA is one of the big, I don't know if is that considered a light rail?
Yeah, I believe, and I'm not totally familiar, so you have to check me on this, but I think they have multiple modes that MARTA kind of manages. But I do believe they do have a light rail system as well, yeah.
Because that's what, living in the suburbs, you're able to take that straight. When I would go to Braves games or Falcons games, you could take it downtown, you could take it straight into the airport. And that was something I missed. Here, not that, luckily now I live 15, 20 minutes from the airport. But I could see where it could be a desire for people that live further out that don't want to travel or drive to the airport. So you're from California, said?
Yeah, Southern California. I lived in Los Angeles a long time.
So is the light rail system going to be as robust as what's in some of these other major cities?
Well, this is the first phase, right? So I think the plan is to grow into that, right? So we do look, I think a lot of our sister cities are kind of Sunbelt cities, or like a Seattle, Denver, Phoenix. LA is interesting because to me, they were a cautionary tale. Like, don't wait too long to do this, right? Like, if this hadn't passed, it's going to cost that much more money later to build it. And that's, still true. We need to build it now. But I think we're kind of more like those mid-sized cities, or that were mid-sized, and as they grew, they created a transit system that helped support and shape that growth. So those are kind of the organizations and the cities that we look to, especially in their governance. Like Sound Transit is actually a separate entity that was created in the late 90s when they had their first vote in Seattle to increase their sales tax, which is a little different from our funding mechanism. And so they created a special purpose entity like us that would deliver that system, and it's been wildly successful, right? So it's the same thing. Like, now there's been so many phases. You can get to the airport, you can get, up to the University of Washington, you can get all over the city on their system. And if you travel there, you don't need to rent a car, right? So I think that's kind of what we're aspiring to. But we've got to get this first phase built, to like kind of launch that.
Yeah, and some of the things I heard, and you can correct me if I'm wrong, this is just through different reports or through the grapevine, is with this project, one of the biggest issues was the budget when it was initially proposed to voters was much lower. It's before real estate exploded in Austin. And I don't know the numbers where it started. I want to say it was around was it like 6 million when they first proposed it, or was it higher than that?
Yeah, the package of projects was around 7 billion.
Oh, 7 billion. Yeah.
Bill.
I did not mean, yeah.
No, you're right. But yes, like through inflation, especially, as we're all very painfully aware of, and the cost of real estate and the cost of construction and the commodities, the inputs that go into this project, we had to, and we had laid out in the city's companion resolution with the vote, talked about a process for the bodies to get together if the changes did need to be made, because that is very common in these projects. You're at 2% design or whatever. When you go to the voters, you start to continue the engineering. So those are all the external circumstances that led to costs just being higher. But also, as we started doing engineering, we found out where utilities were and kind of had to move the design around a little bit, including the tunnel, right? Originally, there was a tunnel. And that just didn't make sense from a cost perspective, although we did go back out to the community and we said, look, here's 5 options, right? And we spent months with the community like we do in Austin. And we said, which one do you prefer? This is our budget. This is what we can afford. What makes sense for this, phase 1 line? And we're going to have priority extensions north and to the airport. And then we're going to build them as fast as we possibly can as more money comes in from the feds or whomever. So yeah, we had to kind of early on, we didn't want to get too far down the road without going back to the public. And then we, kind of followed all the rules that we laid out for ourselves, and went the city and Cap Metro and ATP boards all took a vote on that to approve the phase 1 plan.
So instead of going to the general public and saying like, hey, do you want to keep what we had planned and maybe increase property taxes even more? It's more, you voted on this with this budget in mind. We're going to work to fit that same budget.
Yeah. I mean, politics are always at play, and to say, oh, we're going to go back and ask for more money just didn't seem like the right thing to do. Our job, at least at ATP, was to find a way to build the best project possible for the funding source that we had. If the voters want to go back at some point in the future and say, look, we want to increase this because we want more, then that would be great.
I'm not saying I want to do that. I would imagine, especially right now with just the way the economy is going, that people aren't going to be as willing to vote to increase.
Yeah, it's hard to say, right, what this election cycle will be. I think, and politics is always changing. So I think it was the most prudent choice. And that really is ATP's responsibility, is kind of the steward of the funds, and to make sure that we're doing the best we can with the money that we have. And we are always looking for ways to hit those priority extensions faster. So you never know kind of what could end up in phase 1 as we continue to planning. We're in DC, talking to the federal government. Obviously, politics playing out there will dictate a lot about the project's potential to grow faster, I think, to build more faster. But, we're finding any way possible to build as much as we can.
Yeah. So what does it look like as of today? What can people expect for the light rail to look like, depending on where you live in Austin, who would be affected and who would have access to that?
Well, I think importantly, it's part of a broader network. And so we're working with our partners at Cap Metro and the city. The city owns the right of way. So they're, as you know, like building bike lanes and all those connections. So I think that'll help bring more people to the system. And also Cap Metro is looking at their transit planning to make sure that like really what will become kind of the spine of the transit system, as I see it, is kind of the light rail that we're going to build. But right now there will be a station, kind of the end of the line is north of 38th Street on Guadalupe. And that goes down Guad, cuts across through downtown on 3rd Street, heading east to Trinity, and then goes down across the river. So there'll be a new river crossing, as we're currently kind of imagining it, through the waterfront, South Central Waterfront development, which is the Austin American Statesman site. So we're working very closely with those developers to figure out what's the best way to kind of get through that. And this is preliminary engineering. We're going to go back to and I can talk to that briefly, but we're going to go back to the public this fall to kind of get input on these concepts. And then the project will connect in 2 ways. It'll go down South Congress to Oltorf, will be an end-of-line station, and then out east on East Riverside Drive to Yellow Jacket, which is kind of a small street about 3 miles from the airport, or 1 mile as the crow flies. And like when we pass this new phase 1, we are working very hard to kind of see if we can extend to the airport or north to Crestview Station on Quad as quickly as possible. So those are our priority extensions of that kind of fundamental line. So
with the Metro Rail that's there now, that's not going anywhere?
No.
Okay.
That's on a fixed rail system that freight rail that actually existed that Cat Metro owned before they even added the commuter line to it. So it's a feature of it's a different type of technology, and it will stay, and we'll just connect to that.
Okay. And
at the convention center.
At the convention center. And you said something about tunnels were talked about, and I thought of it as like a subway system, like going through downtown.
Yeah.
So that's been scratched just
we went to the public, and because tunneling is so very expensive, it was just you could get more line if you stayed at grade, as they say, or on the street surface. If we could stay on the street surface through downtown, which isn't without its complexities. Different utilities will have to be moved that are in relation to a system that's at grade versus underneath. It's just kind of apples and oranges, but tunneling is a lot more expensive. So we presented an option with a tunnel, and then every other option did not have a tunnel, the other 4. So folks said it doesn't make sense to build it. It could be in a future phase, but it doesn't make sense now.
Yeah. I mean, it's exciting to think that will all eventually be part of downtown Austin. I guess that's just part of phase 1. What are the future plans? Like, do they want it to go all the way up to Round Rock eventually? Like, what are we talking here?
Well, that's a good question. I mean, there were a lot of conversations before the vote about kind of, I think, originally getting to Stastny or maybe even to William Cannon going south, or up north. There was, up towards 183. Like how, there were conversations where they're still generally in city limits, all within the city limits. But I think, not what I think, but like the property taxes are funding what was passed when we all took a vote, right? So like that money can legally go to fund that project, the first phase of which is the one we're about to start building. We'll start construction in 2027 and aiming to open in 2033. But, if people are clamoring for more, which is always our goal, right? If we're doing our job, if people want this thing faster and they want more of it sooner, then we will vote on more maps, right? Like, where does it make sense? How have the development patterns and the, lifestyle patterns of Austinites, where do they map to? Where do we think the growth is going to happen? And the city does that planning, right? So imagine Austin is a good example, right? Like, so where should we put more light rail to reflect where people want to live, but also kind of maybe help spur the growth in those places?
Yeah. And it's so hard because especially, I don't think anyone that lived in Austin in, we'll call it 2000, expected what it would look like in 2010.
Right.
And then people in 2010 up to 2020, and then it exploded in 2020. And it's so hard to plan that far because what the timeline you just gave was for the first phase to finish completion, we're talking 7 years.
Right.
So you have to plan so far
right
ahead and anticipate what that growth, because you don't want to finish in 2033 and then all of a sudden it's like, this can't even serve all of the people that are living in Austin now.
Yeah. Well, and I think, we work closely with the city. They actually have a Project Connect office that's embedded in our building. Like we work really closely with them because they're going to help with the permitting processes and real estate acquisition and all of that. So they're a critical partner, and they have smart planners who are thinking with us, we're looking at ridership and how to leverage federal funding, which is always critical, right? You got to make sure we can maximize our dollars. So how much match, which is basically there's strings attached, but it's grant money, right? So to get as much as money as we can from the federal government so we can build more. So we're looking at those requirements, but we're also looking at the city's plans and where they're anticipating growth. And they're looking at, working with developers. And I know you're familiar with the real estate community and site plans, and where is the market kind of starting to reflect where the people are living.
Yeah.
And, but, we're just thinking about that. I think what's going to be really transformational about this project, it'll move a lot of people. It'll be another alternative for people to get around, but also just from a real estate perspective, from a development perspective. And we have funding to help mitigate or to slow any displacement of people. Like, that's critical. We want to make sure that folks can stay where they're living. but also it's an opportunity to just make all those places even better, right? To kind of transform the landscape and bring in a lot of density that will support the transit system and bring more riders, right? We just want more people to want to ride our system, the city system, but also Cap Metro's system and get around, not just driving by themselves in their vehicles. So.
Yeah.
So anyway, I think it's going to be transformational from a land use perspective, probably just as much as the way people get around.
Yeah, I mean, Austin right now, when people, I speak to someone that's moving here from maybe another urban area, and they're like, we want a walkable neighborhood. Yeah. Like, it really doesn't exist in Austin. Like, maybe
There's
if
pockets,
you live a few streets off of South Congress or South Lamar, and by walkable, like, you can take walks and ride your bike in your neighborhood, and all your neighbors are going to be out doing the same thing. But if you're like, I want to live somewhere where I can walk to get groceries, walk to go to restaurants, there's just not that many options.
Right, or to go to the doctor or end my job and, just have access to all these things, which every community really deserves to have that type of neighborhood, I think. So this project will help develop those types of things, but we have to be really concerted in our efforts with our city partners and also the development community, to be like, okay, how can we transform spaces to support that vision? And the city does a pretty, very good job of thinking about those things. And they've done a lot of changes to land use code, recently. And a lot of it's because, we know light rail's coming in. We know that it's going to drive people to station areas and all that. So we need to be planning for that growth.
Yeah, they're working right now on creating more density within the city.
Right.
Getting more people, but, you guys are helping support that.
Right. We've kind of like a catalyst for a lot of that work. So and we have time, which is a good thing. It can feel like it's forever, but it'll go by very fast. And we have to be planning and really intentional about the places that we're going to make with each of these stations and how we move through neighborhood.
Yeah. So speaking to that timeline from 2020, when you started working on this up until now, so we're 4 years in, what has that look? I know there's so much. You don't have to give me every detail because we'll be here for a long time, but what have the last 4 years look like? Because you're still talking another 3 years before construction begins. So what are the last 4 and what are the next 3 going to look like?
Yeah, I think the last 4 was a combination, I think pretty early on while we were setting up the organization, establishing the organization. I mentioned there's 55 of us now and then a lot of contracted consulting companies. But the folks that we brought into this organization are this really neat mix of people who understand Austin, either like from the advocacy community or from the city, who are extremely effective and have those relationships, but also, can get projects done in this town, and people who came from all over the country who had done light rail projects in other places, like I mentioned, like Phoenix and Denver and all these places. So they came and joined this team in the first kind of year and a half, 2 years. So we were establishing our team. Our board kind of got, grounded, and they figured out, okay, how do we want to structure this organization? They were able to appoint their first executive director during those first early years. So we kind of moved into our own as an independent functioning organization with a big, building team, and kind of with the new executive director, all the while we were advancing the design of the project. And that's kind of, we went back to the public about, okay, this is what this project is going to cost. This is what we think we can do. And we entered into the federal process over the last year, both the you have to get environmental clearance in order to get federal funding, which is under the National Environmental Policy Act, NEPA, the I-35 went through the same thing. It's a little harder with transit. They don't just say, hey, you guys figure it out. Well, they're very closely working with us to go through that process. So that takes a couple years, and we just started that. And then with the project, we knew we were going to build the phase 1 project. And we also entered into the grant application process, which also it can take 3 years plus, right? Depending on certain projects. But we are moving quickly through those processes because we were ready to go when we started, right? We had been designing the project, working through it since the vote, and coming up with the right project for Austin. So we are advancing. I think our org is in a good place. We've set up our very strong procurement department. We've got a huge solicitation on the street right now for what we call a delivery partner. And that is really to augment our staff. We'd kind of been borrowing contracts from our partners, and now we have this contract out on the street, and they're going to come in and make sure that we properly manage the construction aspects and everything else through the life of the construction. and planning for the next phase. And we've got our design contracts we've awarded, and they're advancing the design further than, the last time we were out public. And through the NEPA process, we're going to actually be coming back to the public with that preliminary engineering, that preliminary design, which got a lot more detail to it than the last design. And we want to talk to the public about different design options. So it's a process, because we are applying for probably the largest grant from the federal government the state's ever seen. And so we got to check all the right boxes, go through all the process, which involves what Austin's really good at, which is going back to the public and making sure that we're all on the same page as we advance the design. And we're getting through the politics, the political milieu, and all the fun things about being in Austin, in Texas, so kind of working through all of that. But that's just par for the course for Austin. And I think we went public with our kind of laid out our high-level initial planning schedule back in March, which, like I mentioned, has us opening in 2033, starting construction in 2027, locking down the federal grant amount, hopefully in 2026 is our goal, to know what that federal share is going to be, right? Because that kind of dictates, okay, now we know the full bucket of money that's available for the project, and make sure that we've got the project that can fit that budget. So we're like marching through all these things, but it's a $7 billion project, and you've got to make sure you're doing it methodically, and we've got all the expertise at the table to get it done.
Like, you need to talk to Elon Musk people. He apparently knows everyone to talk to about moving to Austin. So when you say that you go to the general public to present those, what does that look like? Like, me as a consumer, I'm a homeowner within the city of Austin. Should I be tracking? Should I be following you on Twitter? Is there a website that I should be checking? Yeah,
definitely. If you go to atptx.org, that is our website, but it always has, like, on the front page, the banner of information about time, like when we're ready, when we're going to go back out to the public. Or you can, follow us on all the socials, and is that right? ProjectConnect.com right now. Is there any, like, Project Connect? Sorry, will you edit this out? Okay. So just ignore my
We'll keep it in.
milieu. My asking the communications people.
Well, I guess if you, like, Google search Project Connect, there's plenty of resources as well.
Austin Light Rail specifically. But I think if you start at our website, there's obviously links to, like, our Instagram and our Twitter feed or X feed and LinkedIn and everything else. So there's a lot of good ways through the website to follow our contracts that are going to be going out, for more people to come on to help, any positions we're hiring, and the progress of the project, which in the fall there will be October, November timeframe. There'll be a lot of community engagement coming out. So, yeah.
But when that happens, when you're going to the public, is there, like, a place that I can not vote, but, like, choose which option I like better, or give feedback?
Feedback, absolutely. I think, so in the NEPA process, when we're showing the design, there will be some options in the design that we want the public's feedback on.
Okay.
Yeah, and then just generally commenting about progress of the design and what you guys think about it.
Yeah, well, I remember I have a YouTube channel here where I talk about Austin real estate and updates and stuff, and I remember when it was passed in 2020, I did a video, and I was saying, we're probably 10, 15 years out from this, but already we're 4 years in.
Yeah.
And like you said, it seems like it's far out, and it is. 2033, is 9 years from now, but you said you have kids and you see, like, they're babies, and then you take them to kindergarten, and then they're, like, going to middle school.
Yeah. All I could say is, the bus system that exists is free for kids, right? It's really cheap for the rest of us. Like, I think there's some value in just kind of getting to know the transit system that we have right now, like, kind of getting some experience with it, because that we'll all get to kind of start building the culture around riding transit, and the traffic will continue to get worse. So maybe this will become a better option for folks naturally. But yeah, it'll come before we know it, and construction will start pretty soon. And of course, we'll be talking to the public a lot, getting through that process. We've got I-35 is going to be reconstructed kind of in the same time frame. The airport's being expanded, which is very exciting. There's $25 billion worth of infrastructure projects in Austin. That's why we keep getting grants from the feds. They're super excited about our city. I mean, I'm really optimistic. But yeah, it takes time. It takes time to do it right. But ATP exists because that is our sole focus and our sole mission, and we're not going to stop until it's built. So
yeah. So with the construction, is it like if you live downtown or, where is it going to actually start? Are they working north, down? Are they starting middle out?
We're hiring the folks in the next couple years who are going to actually be doing the final design and construction. That's kind of a bundled contract.
Okay.
And that's kind of the way we're looking at putting those things together right now. Those folks will come in, they're the experts, and they'll help us with our staff decide exactly how I want to stage the construction, phase it, how do we go about it. Different cities do it different ways. I know like in Phoenix, they had planned on doing a phase. They ended up just closing down the whole thing and doing it at the same time. But we need to make that decision carefully with the input from the public. Obviously, we'll be working closely with like the Downtown Association, for example, because their property owners are and their tenants are impacted the most. But in these different areas, working with community representation, but also our experts who are going to say, this is how you're going to get the project built right, So I don't know the answer yet.
No, I know. Well, in a city where there's every downtown, no matter what major city you're in, there's traffic.
Right.
And traffic sucks.
Yes.
In Austin, obviously it's bad when you're downtown during rush hour. So I'm picturing 4th Street or 5th Street where normally it's 2 lanes or 1 lane each way. If they have to shut lanes down, what that's going to look like in conjunction, like you mentioned, with I-35,
right?
A huge rehaul there,
or
overhaul there.
We will need. We plan to. The first part of our construction will be moving utilities, so they'll be phased in that sense. But absolutely, as someone who was formerly with the Downtown Austin Alliance and was working closely with our Transportation Management Association, Movability, who helps with those communities and the outreach and the businesses, especially could be affected, right? So we will go through a planning effort with them and make sure that we're communicating the timing of everything and then working with the city really closely to make sure there's other ways to get in and out of downtown. It'll probably be a little more painful than it is now for a short period, but well worth it.
Short, 7 years.
Well, construction's like 5 or 6.
So that seems to be, we talked budget and that changing, the construction. What do you see as like some of the other big hurdles? Like, I know you don't want to go on record saying like, no, this is starting in 2027 and it's finishing in 2023. Like, I know that doesn't happen.
It's called an initial planning schedule for a reason, but that's what we are working from as a staff.
Yeah.
We have a very detailed schedule that we work to, by the week with deliverables that works towards those deadlines.
And I get that question all the time with real estate. If clients are coming here buying new construction, they're like, it says it's going to be complete in June. I'm like, don't prepare for it to be completed in June. It's not going to happen. If it does, great. What are some of the big hurdles or the big maybe roadblocks for getting this to the finish line over the next 7 to 10 years?
I don't know about I wouldn't use the word roadblock, but for a project of this size in the United States that's seeking federal funding, which they almost always do, we have to go through that process. That process is kind of dictated by the Federal Transit Administration, the Department of Transportation. It goes through a political appropriations process annually. There's the politics of DC. There's also the competition. It's a competitive grant. So we're going up against other projects in the country. I think we're going to do great. And this money doesn't usually come to Texas. It usually goes to California and New York. There's a lot of kind of political support for it to come here. But it's an unknown, right? We're doing everything we possibly can, but I don't know what's going to happen in the fall, right? I think that could impact schedule potentially. But I really believe in my trips to DC and talking to folks on both sides of the aisle, there is a lot of momentum for Austin and there's excitement about this project, and we keep getting grant dollars on smaller projects. So I'm feeling confident there. There's a state, we're in Austin, and there's always, every 2 years we have a legislative session, and last legislative session we defeated a bill that would have slowed the project down, and that could happen again this session. I'm confident we'll defeat it. Lawsuits from folks who have always opposed this project. They oppose everything that's growth oriented. Or
are these like homeowners or?
No, they actually don't live in the city limits, so they don't actually pay the tax. But the plaintiffs, they kind of riled up some plaintiffs to come and get involved. But the attorneys who are always suing the city and now are adding us to their list don't pay the tax. But so And they've teamed up with kind of some actors in the state to try to slow things down. The Attorney General has to mention that we're a local government corporation. We get to issue debt to help fund the capital costs because the money coming in isn't enough for those big expensive years, right? We're really doing heavy construction. And so part of our financial model is to issue some debt to the market. It's been really well received. We think we're going to get very good prices on that debt. But all debt in the state, public debt, has to go through the Attorney General, Kim Paxton. So we're going through right now, we filed a bond validation lawsuit, which basically asks the court to validate the debt so that the AG will have to approve it. So it's really, there's like these things that we're trying to get ahead of any sort of political risk.
Does that, looking at that debt, and I don't know if this is out of your wheelhouse, but looking at that, does that kind of go in correlation with the current market? We're talking about where interest rates are today is very different from where they were 3 years ago.
Yeah, it's a little higher. They've gone up a little bit too, not quite as much as if you're, applying for a mortgage or something like that. But we are keeping that in mind when we're looking at the project cost too. So all those dials that are turning, making sure that we stay within budget to build what we promised.
What are you most excited about for this project?
I'm excited. I have a 9-year-old, almost 10-year-old, and I love Austin. I've been here 12 years. The city's always changing. I know that gives a lot of people heartburn, but it means that if I'm going to be here for another, 10 or 20, I'm not going to get bored. I just love the city. There's so many companies still moving here, jobs, businesses. It's a vibrant place, or I would say one of the most vibrant places in this country. And I want it to remain that way for my son. And maybe he'll come back after college or stay here for college. He's a huge UT fan. We go to all their baseball games. But for me, it's just helping this, being part of this city's growth in a way that's really intentional and continues this economic kind of rock star story that we have, which I think it can't be wrong, right? So the light rail is going to be critical to that in terms of shaping the way that the city develops and driving its economic growth. So for my kid, I think that's what I'm most excited about.
I think that's a really interesting point to bring up. We talk about the votes when we go to the voting booth and we vote. A lot of times we think about us, but also if you have kids, thinking about, okay, what are they going to inherit?
Right. Or nieces or nephews or whatever. But you're just thinking about the future of this place that you love, right? How to keep it Austin, right? There's something about it. There's like a special sauce.
Yeah.
So that's kind of, I feel like we're part of, like I was talking about our organization, like we kind of brought in a lot of expertise from outside. We're listening, but we're really listening to the community. We've hired community. We like contract with community, and then we go to public events. But we really want there to be like a melding of expertise, light rail expertise, getting through the federal process expertise, but also like what's in Austin's best interest. Because we don't want to lose whatever, this light rail needs to reflect what makes the city great. Like Austin FC is a really good example, right? It's like a whole new project. It was a massive infrastructure project and also brought like the first professional team to this city, and it's been a huge success, right? Like those types of things are really good models for us.
Yeah, like let us learn from your mistakes in these other cities and figure out the tips and tricks.
Right.
But we don't want to make Austin Seattle. We don't want to make Austin Phoenix because it is so different. I agree. Like just moving here I moved to Austin in 2013 just because I heard good things about it. I'd never been here before.
Me too.
And I was a teacher at the time, and I interviewed for a job on Skype before like Zoom or video
the early
interview,
days
before any of that stuff was normal, and came here for a weekend, got an apartment, and that was it. We lived here.
Yeah, that's what I felt like. It's just something. I came here for an interview and I was like, this place is great.
Yeah.
Like it just feels like home immediately, and I think so it attracts really great folks like that who are, and I've, for me personally, been able to really get involved in this city and the community because people are open arms, like new ideas. Tell us about where you lived before. What can we learn from you? Like, what do you?
I can see where people that wanted like the smaller kind of like, because cities are going to grow. But if you came from an LA, if you came from San Francisco, New York, Miami, and you wanted something smaller, you come to Austin, you're like, yes, it's smaller, but it's getting there.
Yeah.
Or, if we're getting now all this public transit, light rail system, like we're going to start feeling like, you look at the cranes downtown. Driving in here today, I was like, every time I look at Rainey Street,
Yes.
There's 3 new cranes up.
But Rainy Street's great for people who want Rainy Street, right?
Exactly.
So like something really unique about Austin, I think, is that like you can find what you want still in this city, and the city limits are huge too, right? I mean, then it becomes a matter of like, okay, how do you get access to all the places you move around the city and get to where you want to go? But people who really want to be able to ride the train every day and they want to live in a walkable neighborhood and, you know, just really close access, if that's what they want, this will kind of facilitate more of that.
Yeah.
It's a 10-mile system in the heart of the city. There's plenty of other places in the city. If, you know, that's not your cup of tea, I think that's kind of what makes it great. We get an abundance of options. You know?
So how many total stops will there be in the light rail right as of now?
I think we've got a range, but I think we have like between 9 and 12 stops. So we're going to talk about that a little bit more in the NEPA process. It's called the Draft Environmental Impact Statement, very legal term, but that's kind of, we're going to go back out to the public and talk to folks about the design and different options and make sure that we're on the right tracks.
Who knows? LA is having the Olympics in 4 years. Maybe in 16 or 20 years, they'll be talking about Austin.
We're going to need more light rail if we do that.
We'll need more light rail. We'll have a bigger airport by then.
Yeah.
Maybe. Do you know anything about that project? Like how long we can expect for that to take? Not that you're involved with it.
I'm not sure about the exact timeline. I don't want to misspeak, but they're all kind of happening around the same time. We are working really closely with the airport so that when we do build that extension, whether it's, you know, with the first phase or soon thereafter, that the way that they're constructing the airport will be able to fold it in. So you're going right to the terminal on the light rail.
Yeah. I think that's ideal.
Absolutely. Yeah. And every time you travel and you're like, oh, I don't have to rent a car. I could just hop on it.
I don't have to rent a car. I don't have to park if we're taking the family to the airport.
Yeah.
All of that is super helpful. So I guess, is there anything else that you would encourage someone living in the city of Austin that's a taxpayer that whether they voted for this or not, it's happening and they're going to be affected? Anything else for them to know about this project or, you know, questions they should be asking about it?
I think definitely folks should go to atptx.org and just learn a little bit about what's happening, what the project is, and certainly towards the end of summer, early fall, if they can attend an event, even if it's just like an online open house and give feedback. As you can imagine, there's always the same people who come to community engagement events, and so cool to reach a different audience and have more people give us input, right? The more input we have, it's just the better the project will be. So I think that, and, just to know that this project is on track. We're hitting every milestone. We're working closely with the federal process to maximize the grant dollars and loan dollars and whatever we can get from the feds, and then working closely with the city. I think that's something that we haven't done in the past as well, but we are all in alignment, with the transit agency, Cap Metro, this special purpose entity that's building, delivering Project Connect and Light Rail, and then our partners at the city who are critical to the future growth of the city. So
yeah.
And the community, which is a number one partner.
No, well, I'm glad you were able to explain the differences, how because I just thought Project Connect was the light rail.
Oh, yeah.
That was it.
So it's kind of the umbrella term for the vote.
Yeah.
And now each of these projects has kind of taken on their life of their own. Cap Metro has a lot of experience with bus projects. So they really helped, and they're under construction, what are called the Metro Rapid projects. So those are under construction and should be open in the next year or two. And then at Q2 Stadium, McCalla Station opened at the beginning of this year, right? That was also funded through the Prop A dollars, which was Project Connect dollars in 2020. So
that was a quick one.
You're right. And Cap Metro kind of led the procurement because that's just their bread and butter. They operate the red line. And so an ATP is moving the light rail kind of through all the federal processes, and we're going to be hiring our design and construction firms. We already have preliminary engineering, but the final design and get that thing going under construction, that's our job. And then the city, part of the vote was $300 million in kind of displacement prevention funding. And so we kind of pay that over to the city in tranches, and they've already started acquiring property and helping organizations make sure that folks can stay in place as we build all of this kind of economic driving engine, right? That's gonna potentially change our city, but we want to be able to shape and help people stay where they are as it changes.
It's it's impacting you in the short term because there's construction and all that.
Yeah,
but
absolutely.
Ultimately will help bring more people to those businesses. Does the light rail have a fun Austin name? Is there a?
We have not done the branding on the actual light rail system yet. I think we'll probably do that. Yeah, I think we'll go through that. Potentially, kind of using the same team that worked with Austin FC, which is exciting. Yeah. And but right now we're just. I think the most important thing for us to do is to try transit, like once a week. Just try it. Ride your bike in the bike lanes. Like just get around a little differently, because if we have a culture that kind of is more familiar, which I think a lot of Austinites, just don't have a lot of experience with the existing system, that's gonna help our system just like hit the ground running on day one and help accelerate some of that, the future bases, I think. Cool. And extensions.
All right, well, I'm excited for it.
Yeah, me too.
I'm gonna go to that website after we're done and bookmark it so I can
good
not get too obsessed with it. But
we can add you to a mailing list or something too. Although I think you can do that through the website.
Okay, so is there anything else people need to know as far as tracking it? You gave us kind of looking up on social media, going to the website, but there's a mailing list.
Yeah, I think through the website, it's really easy to see the ways to go get to our social or to be subscribed to a newsletter or all those different things. Or just like poke around and get more information if you're curious about the project. But yeah, well, as soon as we have events kind of rolling out, there'll be kind of banners on the landing page when you first go to the website to tell you about them. So
cool. Well, thank you so much for all the info and something to look forward to for anyone living in Austin, whether you're a taxpayer or not, visiting Austin. It'll be great for our city moving forward.
Yeah, and the more people who kind of weigh in on the project, the better the project will be. So there's time for that, which is exciting. Before you know it will be under construction. I'm sure.
Yeah. So if you're listening, go out and give your feedback so you're not complaining after the fact. You could say, I spoke.
We'll take your complaints too.
Yeah.
We have to document all of it for the federal process.
Yeah. People like doing that though. They like waiting until it starts and they can't get feedback anymore, and then they want to give their feedback. So you have time right now.
We also have contact information if folks, anytime they can send us any feedback, because there's all kinds of information on the website. So if you want to do it on your own schedule, go for it.
Cool. All right. Thanks, Casey.
Yeah. Thank you, Ian.